Welcome to Alyssa Reviews. My name is Alyssa, and this is my review for Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 1, Episode 10, the Season 1 finale, in fact, titled Equality of Mercy. So first, I must give a very serious spoiler warning this time. Sometimes I'm just like, yeah, spoilers. But no, really. If you have not seen this episode, not only should you not be watching this video, but please do not watch any YouTube video that reviews this episode until you watch the episode. Paramount Plus actually did a really great job of hiding the plot of this episode, and you don't want to ruin that. You really don't. This episode will be so much better if you don't know what's going to happen in it. So please watch the episode first before you watch this video, or frankly, any other video about the episode. Okay, one quick programming note before I dive into it. I will be giving my rating out of 10 for this episode at the end of this review, and then I will be giving my rating out of 10 for the season overall. So, bravo. This is the episode that I have been waiting for all season. I have been talking about how Strange New Worlds is really strong with their character development, their character stories, their character interactions. The acting has been superb. The writing has been superb. Everything that they have attempted to do, they have done very well. In a lot of cases, the things that they are doing are not my favorite tropes, such as the virus episode and then the silly comedic body swapping episode. Not my favorite tropes in general, but they did an excellent job with them. But what I hadn't seen yet was a truly great Star Trek episode. This is it. This is the truly great Star Trek episode. Now, this may sound hyperbolic, but for me personally, this is an instant classic and one of the greats in the Star Trek franchise. Now, I have watched a couple other reviews. I tend to try not to watch a lot of other reviews before I do my own, just so that I don't have other people's thoughts infiltrating my brain and influencing me. But neither of them have said it's one of the greats of the franchise. In fact, one of them said it's not the best of the season, and another one said they weren't sure if it was the best of the season or not. To me, it is by far the best of the season. It's not even close. And it is one of the greats of the franchise. It reminds me of two episodes in particular. Yesterday's Enterprise, well, 3 technically, because then there's A Year of Hell Parts 1 and 2. Yesterday's Enterprise being from Next Generation, Year of Hell being from Voyager, and those are other episodes that also mess with the timeline and show us an alternate timeline. So Yesterday's Enterprise came in at number 1 on my top 20 list of favorite Next Generation episodes. And Year of Hell came in at number 2 on my Voyager top 20, although really was kind of a tie with Scorpion, but I decided to give Scorpion the edge. But the point is, those are two of the great episodes in all of Star Trek, and I put this one up there with it. And then one of the reviews I watched also mentioned another episode that I didn't think of initially, but the Next Generation episode Tapestry. There is a lot of similarities between this and Tapestry. I believe Tapestry was like number 5 or 6 in my Next Generation list. Also a great episode. So this episode keeps a lot of really good company. To me, it truly is one of the greats. And in some ways, it's even better than those other episodes. I'm not saying that it is totally better, but in some ways it is, because of the character stories, which has been the strength of Strange New Worlds are throughout the season. And in this case, we are focusing on Pike, and we are continuing a story that has been ongoing since episode 1 of the season, his struggle with the knowledge of his future, and it all comes to a head in this episode, and I think it's very appropriate to have the finale focus on that. My original thinking was that they were going to have it focus on Spock, because we've been spending a lot of time with Spock and T'Pring and all of that, and we were going to have Cybok come in because he was teased. But this was a much better way to end the season by focusing on Pike. And those other episodes don't hone in on one character the same way. And yesterday's Enterprise really focuses on Tasha Yar, if it does on anyone, and she wasn't even on the show anymore. And Year of Hell has some excellent character sketches, but it's multiple characters. Whereas here, this was a payoff for a character story, a very interesting one that we have been following all throughout the season. And I thought it was even appropriate that they brought back Captain Pike's girlfriend or whatever, his friends with benefit, his friend with benefits from that other ship. It's kind of tie things together nicely from where we started in episode 1. So not only one of the great alternate timeline episodes, but also a great character episode. And as I alluded to earlier, Paramount Plus did an excellent job of keeping the plot of this episode under wraps. In fact, when I saw the trailer, I just didn't know what the episode was about. It was like, oh, they're fighting against some vague, undefined villains. Who are these villains? Who are they fighting against? Why am I supposed to get excited about this episode? I'm not excited about this episode. I don't know what's even happening in this episode. And now that I've seen it, I'm so glad they did it that way. That was the only way that they could do it. Because they needed to keep this a secret so that we could be surprised when we see that this is an alternate timeline episode. And that it features Captain Kirk. Paul Wesley as Captain Kirk. Another well-kept secret. We did have the photos come out of Paul Wesley as Captain Kirk, but we were told he will be appearing in season 2. Now, from what I understand, he will also be appearing in season 2. In that case, you would presume in the present day of the time of the regular timeline, he would probably be Lieutenant Kirk. Maybe Pike is going to do some research and kind of find Lieutenant Kirk since he met the future version of him. So that's what I would assume Paul Wesley would be doing in season 2. But that's what they told us. He would be in season 2, which technically is not a lie, but they completely hid the fact that he's actually in the season 1 finale. Now, I was one who was not excited about seeing Kirk because I'm like, I don't want them to overuse the legacy characters and just put them in there for the sake of being there and go, oh, look at here's Kirk, isn't that cool, kind of thing, which is what I was afraid they were going to do, but I didn't even think about the possibility of them doing an alternate timeline story with Captain Kirk being the captain of the Farragut. Didn't even cross my mind, and I was surprised all the way up to the point where they showed him. Even when they said they were meeting up with the Farragut, someone else has pointed out to me that Captain Kirk has stated on the original series that that was the ship that he used to be on prior to the Enterprise, was the Farragut. So that makes sense, but when they said Farragut, I didn't think of that because they distracted me by saying Leon was on that ship. So I was actually expecting Captain Leon Noonien Singh to be on that ship. So they kind of did a little misdirect, made me totally think of Leon and totally forgot about the fact that the Farragut is the ship that Kirk has said he was on before he was captain of the Enterprise. So in this timeline, with Pike not suffering his fate and ended up in the little beepy chair, Captain Kirk is captain of the Farragut, while Pike remains captain of the Enterprise. So I was not expecting this at all, and I was like, yes, it's Kirk. And I know fans of the J.J. Abrams films will disagree with me, but I have said before, I don't think Zachary Quinto is a good Spock. I don't think Chris Pine is a good Kirk. Chris Pine is a fine actor, but when I see him, he's playing Chris Pine. Like, Chris Pine is kind of the same in all of his movies. So I watch that movie and I see Captain Chris Pine. I don't see Captain Kirk at all. And Paul Wesley does an excellent job of subtly channeling William Shatner. He every once in a while he'll get that William Shatner cadence going a little bit. We have, but he doesn't like go over the top. He's not like doing the Jim Carrey version of William Shatner or anything. It's very subtle and it's not all the time. It's just kind of the perfect amount of channeling William Shatner while also bringing his own self to the character. And he does enough that I can buy that it's Captain Kirk. Like, my mind can make the connection with, okay, this is the same character from the original series, just as I do with Ethan Peck. Okay, he's different, but my mind does make the connection. This is the same character from the original series. I do not get that at all with Chris Pine or Zachary Quinto. Sorry. I just don't. So, to me, he's already better than Chris Pine as Captain Kirk. Chris Pine is a fine actor, but he's not Captain Kirk. Anyways, he did an excellent job. This was all excellent. I'm kind of going off the books here. Usually I do my overview and then I go through the plot. And that's not really how I'm doing it. I'm just kind of rambling on. I do have some other things that I would like to talk about, though. I want to talk about the callback to Balance of Terror. And then I also want to get into how the characters are different or the same in this episode. Okay, let me get into the Balance of Terror of it all. The Balance of Terror, of course, if you don't know, is a classic Star Trek episode from the original series that this episode mirrors, and it does an excellent job at that. This episode stands apart from those other alternate timeline episodes that I mentioned before, and that is the first episode of Star Trek to do the what if scenario. It reminds me of Marvel's What If, both the animated show and the comic books. This is what if Captain Pike was the captain of the Enterprise during the events of A Balance of Terror. I can even picture what the comic book would look like in the 1970s. And I would see that and get pumped for it because it's an excellent concept. And the way Tapestry comes into it, I mentioned Tapestry, is that future Pike is kind of playing the role of Q and showing Pike why it is important that he stay on track for his fate. And even though a couple people die, it's actually way worse because millions will die if it goes the other way. And this episode also proves me wrong because I said at the beginning of the season I thought Pike is a way better captain than Captain Kirk. However, Captain Kirk's unorthodox captaining style is more appropriate for certain situations, and this was one of them. Captain Pike, while well-intentioned with his need to negotiate, actually made the wrong call in this particular case and made things a lot worse. Reminds me a lot of Edith Keeler from the original series episode A City on the Edge of Forever, where she has good intentions and wants to make peace with the Nazis, but it calls the Nazis to conquer the Earth, and then the timeline has changed, and that's why she needed to die in that situation. So it's a very similar thing where, and here, Pike needs to go in the beepy chair and not be captain of the Enterprise anymore so that Kirk can be there to prevent an all-out war from happening. And it's funny because Pike thinks that Kirk would be the one who would cause the war, but it turns out it ends up being him. And it turns out Kirk would have been the right captain for the job, which I find that to be really fascinating. Really, really interesting. Now, as far as the parallels between the episode, I would love to go back and watch that episode again. And I think I'm going to very soon go back and watch A Balance of Terror and then watch this episode again so I can catch all of the parallels. But I did catch a few. There are definitely some lines lifted directly from the episode, such as when Spock is talking about his Vulcan ancestors and how aggressive they were and how if the Romulans are like them, then we don't want to mess with them and we should attack. I believe that line may have been taken directly from the episode. The interaction between Pike and the Romulan commander is very similar between the interactions of Kirk and the Romulan commander. In fact, I think one of his lines is exactly the same, like perhaps in another universe we would be friends or something along those lines. The guy who played this Romulan commander did an excellent job. Now, originally it was played by Mark Leonard, who plays Sarek, so I thought it would be kind of funny if they got the same actor who plays Sarek from Star Trek Discovery and have him play this Romulan commander. I would have laughed, but I think that would have been confusing for a lot of people. So it makes total sense that they should not do that. They absolutely should not do that. Like, obviously they don't want to do that, but I would have thought it was really funny if they had gotten the same actor who played Sarek from Discovery, since it was the actor who played Sarek on TOS, who was the Romulan commander. Anyways, a lot of really good parallels all throughout. And then there's the one almost exact scene where we find out that the Romulans look like Vulcans for the first time, and they play the same music, the dun 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 dun, and then focus in on Spock, and he does the raised eyebrow, which is pretty much exactly how it was done in the original series. Now, I'm of two minds of that scene. On the one hand, it almost seems out of place for Strange New Worlds that music comes out of nowhere, and for Ethan Peck to, the camera just like zoom in on Ethan Peck and for him to do the raised eyebrow doesn't seem to fit with what we have seen on Strange New Worlds before. But on the other hand, it was fucking cool. And I kind of lean toward the latter take on that scene. It was just fucking cool. So, was it a little out of place? Yes, but it was fantastic. Fantastic callback, fantastic nostalgia. And they really did a great job of having the same story take place in this alternate timeline. Now, I don't know about the Farragut being there. The Farragut was nowhere near the original timeline, but I don't care because was super amazingly cool to see Captain Kirk, because then that way you can compare and contrast the two different captains and their captaining styles. And really, I'll admit, okay, neither one of them is actually better than the other. I just don't really like William Shatner that much, I think is what it boils down to. I think they just have different captaining styles, and that was made very, very clear in a really excellent way throughout this episode when we see the interactions between these two captains and their two different approaches. And as it turns out, Captain Kirk's approach ultimately saves millions of lives and saves this all-out war from taking place. It's a very, very powerful episode, a very powerful story, ending with Pike realizing, much as Picard realizes in Tapestry, that he had to go through his pain in order for things to be right. And Pike, I think, is now at peace that he's going to have to go through that in order to keep things from millions of people from dying. And they also threw in the Spock thing. Now, Spock, his injuries look very similar to the ones that Pike will eventually get. He has all those burns. So I almost wanted them to show Spock in the BP chair a little later. I think it was implied that he was going to go into the BP chair. And not only is there an all-out war between the Federation and Romulans, but there's never going to be reunification. As we learned in Star Trek Discovery Season 3, Spock was successful in reunification, and eventually the Romulans and Vulcans came back together to form Navarre. In the 32nd century, that's what it's like. So Spock is a hugely important person when it comes to making peace with the Romulans, not only between Federation and the Romulans, but the Vulcans and the Romulans. So with him in a BP chair, then none of that happens, and the entire course of history is changed. So very, very powerful stuff. Now, before I get into my rating, I kind of want to go through some of the character stuff because I find a lot of this really, really interesting. Let's talk about the cast of characters and how the crew differs on this version of the Enterprise captained by Pike. Now, Sulu isn't there, but Ortegas still is. You say, well, why is that? And I think that that makes a lot of sense to me, because a captain will get to select their crew, or a crew member may want to select their captain. So maybe in the proper timeline, when Captain Pike goes into the BP chair, Ortegas doesn't want to be on the Enterprise anymore without Pike, or maybe Ortegas is very upset by this. Maybe Ortegas is somehow involved in it too and also gets injured. I don't know. For whatever reason, in the prime timeline, Ortegas does not continue on the Enterprise, but she remains there with Pike as the captain, and then Sulu. I would have almost loved to have seen Sulu on, on the Farragut because maybe he was Captain Kirk's man. I don't know. We don't know why Sulu isn't there, but he's not, and it's fine. We do get a great cameo from the voice of Scotty, so we know that he is the engineer there, and I thought that was great, and I didn't need to see him. They don't need to actually cast him. Hearing the voice and him saying, "I'm not a miracle worker, Spock," that was really funny. So I appreciated that. Of course, Lieutenant Uhura has taken her station that she had in the original series, wearing the uniform. I was going to call it a dress uniform, but not a dress uniform, but a uniform that is also a dress that the women wore in the original series. And her mannerisms are more similar to Nichelle Nichols' version of the character, and I think it shows a older, more mature Uhura. So I think it makes sense. And I'm glad that they didn't have her wear a Nichelle Nichols wig or anything and have the hair. She just has, the same shaved head. I think that's appropriate. I think that's fine. I think it would have been silly if they tried to give her a wig or something. So that very much worked for me. Leon has been transferred to another ship at this point. She's a commander now. I would almost want to say she's the first officer. She's wearing a yellow shirt, but they never specify. But we see that she's grown and matured as a character, and she's giving Pike a hug. We also learned that Una has been arrested for the thing that we found out about earlier in the season, that she is genetically modified. This is my one gripe with the episode, and that is the ending. It actually was very similar to the ending of Lower Decks season 2, where we end with Captain Freeman being arrested, and here we end with Una being arrested. I would have liked this to have been saved for season 2. I don't feel like that ending had really anything to do with the main plot of the entire rest of the episode. It felt tacked on to me. I think you can bring that back up in season 2. You're doing your previously ons. You can do previously on Star Trek Strange New Worlds, and you can show the scenes from this episode and remind us that in this alternate timeline, Una was arrested, and then show it. I think that would have been more palatable for me. I didn't like it being tacked on to the ending of this episode. But it's just a very, very, very minor gripe, and overall doesn't affect the quality of this really incredible classic episode overall. I am really curious where they're going to go with this, because in that alternate timeline, Una is still in prison 7 years later, and I don't know why Pike going into the BP chair would change that. It seems like that's her fate, but we can't have Rebecca Romaine off the show, can we? She's got to still be on the show, right? So I'm very curious with which direction they're going to go here and how they're going to get Una back. Very, very interested in that. Although, again, I wish they had saved this for season 2. So I think that is about all I have to say for this episode. I could go on for a very long time, but I think I'll cut it off here and go ahead and give my rating out of 10. And then, as I said earlier, I will then get my rating out of 10 for the season as a whole. Alrighty, so my rating out of 10, with 1 being the lowest possible score and 10 being the highest possible score for season 1, episode 10 of Strange New Worlds, is a 10! An absolute 10. And the only blemish is the one I just mentioned with the scene tacked on at the end, but that's really nothing. That does not take away from the excellence of this episode. To me, an instant classic. I will put it up there with my number 1 Star Trek Next Generation episode, Yesterday's Enterprise, and my number 2 Voyager episode, A Year of Hell, parts 1 and 2, as an example of excellence. in alternate timeline stories, the first Star Trek story to do a true what if story, and they pulled it off amazingly well. An amazing character sketch of Captain Pike, which has been the strength of the show all throughout the season, is their character sketches, their character development, their character interactions have all been really, really good. And this was the ultimate in that, and it was the perfect way to end the first season, to kind of bring things back around from where we started the first episode, with bearded Pike being all depressed about his future. So just magnifique. I don't care what anyone else says. To me, this is an instant classic, and I consider it one of the greats and easily the best episode of the season. It is a 10. Now, let me go ahead and talk briefly about the season as a whole, and then give my rating out of 10 for season 1 as a whole. I think this is easily the best season 1 of any Star Trek show that's ever been made. Most Star Trek season 1s are not very good. One might even say all of them aren't very good. I think Voyager was fairly strong as far as season 1s go. Lower Decks probably was pretty good. Other than that, most of them are the worst season of their respective shows. And I hope that this is the worst season of Strange New Worlds, because that would mean Strange New Worlds would be amazingly good. As I have alluded to all throughout the season, the character development is excellent. Storytelling is excellent. Even when they engage in tropes that I don't particularly care for, such as the virus trope, they do a great job of it. There were some slip-ups here and there. Last week's episode with the aliens, and Predator recreation and kind of maybe oversaturating us in character stories. That one was not my favorite. Episode 6, that stupid Pike romance thing that shouldn't have been there. That one was not great. But overall, the season as a whole was an incredible season, and my rating out of 10 for season 1 of Star Trek Strange New Worlds as a whole is a 9. A 9 out of 10. And I will also inform you that this makes it currently my number 1 season show of 2022, as I do keep a running list of my rankings as I watch shows. My previous number 1 was The Expanse season 6, which was also a 9 out of 10. But Star Trek is just more true and dear to my heart than The Expanse, so that it gets a slight edge over it. So it's actually my number 1 show so far, though we're only in early July, so I expect that there will be some show or two that I will give a 10 to at some point this year that will overtake Strange New Worlds. But right now, sitting with a 9 out of 10 is thus far my favorite show of 2022. Okay, everybody, thank you so much for joining me this week. That's it for my coverage of Strange New Worlds. I'll be back whenever Lower Decks comes back on, which I haven't heard an official announcement, but usually it's on in August, so I feel like it should be coming pretty soon. But I will be covering that weekly. Also, you can go and retroactively check out my previous reviews for Strange New Worlds if you have not. Also Discovery, also Lower Decks from season 2, all on this channel. And I've done top 10s of Next Generation, or top 20s rather, of Next Generation, Voyager, and Deep Space Nine, and the original series. So check out all of that stuff. Subscribe, and I will see you all really soon. Goodbye.